We got Docker set up, and before we continue with Linux containers, we need to install and configure MariaDB. We'll need a database for the backups approach I'll use for both Docker and Linux containers, plus there will be some new Ansible tricks I want to show you, including Ansible Vault. Each time we back up Linux or Docker container, we'll create an entry in the database. Then, when all backups are hopefully done, we'll compare the list in the database for that day with the list in a file where we noted everything we want to backup. Then we'll send a notification with results to a Zulip stream. We are missing a few pieces before we can do all that, so let's start with the database. Let's start by creating the directory structure for this role. So MariaDB with subdirectories tasks, files, handlers, and defaults. This defaults directory is new, and you use it to store variables which don't require user input during playbook run. I'll use it to store MariaDB user passwords in a special way with the help of Ansible Vault. Let's first open main.yml in tasks subdirectory. First, using the pacman module, I'll install MariaDB and python-pymysql packages. We need this second one so that Ansible can interact with MariaDB. Also, don't be confused if you see MySQL instead of MariaDB somewhere. MariaDB is a fork of MySQL and commands are interchangeable. We'll then initialize MariaDB. If you've ever installed MySQL or MariaDB, you know that after installation you need to initialize it. And if you haven't, go check ArchWiki. With systemd module, I'll then start and enable MariaDB service on boot. Then I will set the password for MariaDB root user and again check Ansible docs for details on all these parameters. Two things that should catch your attention is one, this no-log parameter, which will disable logs during Ansible run for this module so that the password can stay hidden. And two, this MariaDB root password placeholder, which I'll explain in a minute. I'll remove anonymous MariaDB user, and then there are these two included tasks for creating databases and users. I will then copy this script to the root scripts directory on the server, which we've already created for the script that handles pacman's mirror list. And then I'll add a cron tab entry, which will run this script each night. We might run this role in the future, maybe to add a user or a database or to change user's password, but we don't want to run each of these modules, such as MariaDB initialization script, over and over again. That's what these last two modules are for. First, I will create a file named MariaDB initialized true, and then I will add immutable flag to that file. Immutable flag is an additional file attribute which prevents editing or deleting the file before that flag is removed. Now that we have that, I will go back to the top of the file and add this. I want to check if that file exists and register that to a variable, meaning if that file is present, this here will be true, and if it isn't, this will be false. Now I can add a condition to each module I don't want to run if MariaDB is already initialized. First, you can ignore pacman module because it has this state present attribute which can handle that, but this built-in shell would run each time you run this role. If, however, we add this when condition, it will run only if this is false, meaning if the MariaDB initialized true doesn't exist. Systemd is handled by the module itself. I don't want to set root user password over and over again. Same thing for removing the anonymous user. This will be handled in the database definitions. This is fine. Backup script is fine because we might have some changes we want to copy to the server. Cron tab is handled by the module itself. and I don't want to create this file and set the flag over and over again. Save the file and open databases.yml also in tasks subdirectory. I will first copy DDL from files subdirectory to /tmp on the VPS, and then I will create the database by first authenticating to the MariaDB using root credentials, then giving the name to the database, and then importing the copied DDL. Save the file and let's create the DDL. Open backups.sql in files subdirectory, and I will create one simple table named list, which we'll use to store information about backups. Save the file and let's open users.yml back in tasks subdirectory. Using the community MySQL user module, we again first authenticate to the MariaDB server. Then we give this user a name and a password. We specify a host from which this user can connect. We give it some privileges, in this case all access to the backups database. We want this user to be present, and we hide logs from the Ansible playbook. I'll repeat this section with one difference. For host, I will specify the WireGuard subnet so that I can also connect directly from my laptop. Save the file and let's create a backup script which we will run each night with cron. Open MariaDB dump all databases.sh inside files subdirectory. And let me explain a bit. So first I'm setting few variables, and then I run MySQL dump for each of the databases. I will have only backups database, but this script will work with any number of databases. Then in this section here, I first get a list of all created backups, and for each of those I check if it's created in the last 7 days, or in the last month and on Thursday, or in the last year and on the first day of the month. If not, I delete it. You can tweak this to your liking, but having this kind of spaced out logic has proven as good solution through the years. Save the file, make it executable with chmod +x, and now let's talk about Ansible Vault. You can use Ansible Vault to handle sensitive information such as passwords. As with everything, there's a million different options and ways to use it, but we'll focus on encrypting individual variables with Ansible Vault. First, we need to edit ansible.cfg and add this line. This will tell Ansible which file to read to retrieve the Vault password. Save this file and then open this .vault_password file and put your password in it. Save this one too, and then we can do this. Inside your virtual environment, run Ansible Vault encrypt string and then give it a name. In my case, this is MariaDB_root_password. You press return, you enter your password, and then do not press return. You press Ctrl+D twice, and you end up with an output like this one. Let's open main.yml in defaults subdirectory and create an entry in this format. First, you use the same name you used for that password's placeholder in main.yml in tasks subdirectory, and then you paste the output that Ansible Vault has produced. I'll do the same thing for another user named backup script. So MariaDB_backup_script, and with Ansible Vault create new password, enter your password, Ctrl+D twice, and then paste this value. Now, when Ansible sees password placeholder in main.yml in tasks subdirectory, it will search for that name here in main.yml in defaults subdirectory, and using the vault password we stored in .vault_password file, it will decrypt it. Ansible knows to look for the password in that file because we told it so in ansible.cfg. Save the file, open setup.yml, add MariaDB role and comment out all previous roles, save the file, and in virtual environment run Ansible playbook. Ansible has finished, so let's go to the VPS and check if everything is okay. Here on the VPS we can do systemctl status mariadb.service, and we can see that it is running and that it is enabled on boot. Then we can do mysql-p. Remember that MySQL and MariaDB commands are interchangeable. We type in the root password, and if we do show databases, we can see that backups database is created. We can also do select user, host from mysql.user and see users we have created. And we can do use backups and then describe list table. And great, everything is there. We can also confirm that Ansible has added an entry to the cron tab. And if you ever wish to edit the time of execution of this script, you can do so in Ansible by editing the main.yml in tasks subdirectory in the MariaDB role. And Ansible will know to update that entry. It will not add a new entry as long as you use this same name. In another shell here on the VPS, let's run the MariaDB dump all databases script and see if it works. If I run the script, I will see this message here saying access denied for root at localhost. The reason is the script itself can't authenticate to the MariaDB server. There are a few ways you can solve this, but what I usually do is I create a file called .my.cnf, which is readable only by root and is read by MySQL or MariaDB to find the password for authentication. So let's go and create that file. .my.cnf should be in root's home directory, so just /root, and it should also have 600 as its permissions, meaning readable and writable only by root. And it should look like this. Save the file, and if I now run MySQL, I don't have to provide my password. It will work by reading the contents of .my.cnf. I can also go to the scripts directory and run the backup script again. And this time no error. Let's see if I can connect to MariaDB from my laptop. I'm currently not connected with WireGuard, meaning that if I check for do-p's IP address in the route list, I won't find it. Meaning I have to go through the default gateway over the internet in order to reach it. If I now try to connect to the MariaDB on do-p as backup script user and authenticate, what do you think it will happen? It won't work, but not because of the authentication issues, but because IP tables isn't allowing connection on MariaDB's port 3306. Let's add a rule which will allow that and try again. So on the VPS, IP tables -i input, protocol is TCP, destination port is 3306, accept, run the same command again, type in my password, and the error is now different, and we can see that connecting from my residential IP address is not allowed. Now let's try that again, but this time I am connected with WireGuard, and route list will show that I will use this tunnel to reach this IP. And if I now run my SQL command and type in my password, it will work. Even if I delete this rule, it will still work, because I'm not connecting to the MariaDB from the outside. I'm connecting through the WireGuard tunnel, and MariaDB will see that my source IP is from the WireGuard subnet, which I explicitly allowed. And that's it for MariaDB. We installed it, done some initial configuration, protected ourselves from rerunning stuff we don't want with the immutable file, added a user and a database, and in the process learned some basics of Ansible Vault.